Today we're covering a highly requested AU, dipping back into the Bikini Bottom. And here's the next AU I'm going to be covering after this one. The Total Drama Island one will be finally coming next week, so look out for that. Now without further ado, let's take a deep dive into the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, where everything is dark, covering the Bikini Bottom and its horror. You see, in this story, Patrick doesn't want to be the friendly star anymore. He wants to be the star that eats his friends. Chasing down and consuming all of his victims in the Bikini Bottom, it's all up to his friends to put this all to an end. The story started all one day when Spongebob approached Patrick asking, "Hey Patrick, you wanna come jellyfishing?" Patrick? And then he opens his eyes and says, "Do you know how starfish feed, SpongeBob? Let me show you." Our stomach extends outside of our bodies, penetrating our prey and injecting them with enzymes so they may be digested externally. And as Patrick literally eats SpongeBob from the inside out, he apologizes. Now, if you're a fan of SpongeBob SquarePants, you know that Patrick usually eats through his mouth and chews with it. But did you know that he's a starfish and realistically, they don't eat through their mouths? When eating, a starfish pushes its stomach out through its mouth and releases powerful enzymes that start breaking down their prey until they can fully digest it. So what Patrick was doing to SpongeBob is what starfish actually do, and is how they're able to eat hard shells from clams whole. Now, sometime later that day, we're shown Sandy hiding behind Patrick's house saying, "Now's my chance to make that monster pay for what he did." And she slices Patrick in half, seemingly killing him, saying, "I'm sorry, Patrick." That's when Patrick says, "Sea stars can regenerate, Sandy," while disgustingly morphing his body into something new. "All you did was double my appetite." That's when Sandy somehow gets away and barges into the Krusty Krab. And Mr. Krabs says, "Sandy, where's me SpongeBob? I'm supposed to open up soon and I need me stir fry cook." "He's gone, you greedy scavenger, and if you don't want to join him in half the Bikini Bottom, you'll help me and board up this place." "But me customers!" And eventually 6 hours later, they get the place boarded up. And after Sandy says, "Now all we have to do is wait for him to pass by." And that's when Krabs says, "So, why didn't we go to a place now surrounded by windows?" And Sandy slaps him and says, "Shh, did you hear that?" And sooner or later, something crashes through the building. It's Patrick's arm. And Sandy says, "Don't move, it can't see us." And that's when the arm turns to both of them and says, "I have eyes on each of my arms, Sandy." That's when he snatches up Sandy, taking her away. "You're next, Krabs." And Mr. Krabs tries to plead with Patrick, saying, "Wait, please, this is insane! This is evil!" And he rises in back of Krabs. "No, this is Patrick." And in the next moment, Krabs says, "You forget yourself, Patrick," into his true crab form, a form that if you're a true SpongeBob fan, you remember from that one episode where it was basically sea creatures versus land creatures, and it got to the point where the sea creatures were gonna go on land, and we basically see the truest forms of SpongeBob, Patrick, Krabs, and Squidward. So Krabs uses his form and reminds Patrick that crabs eat starfish, ripping the head off and the spine out of Patrick. And just when he thought he won, he hears a voice saying, "Do not forget I've forgotten, Krabs, that your Krabby Patty secret formula is me." And that's when we're shown a flashback of Mr. Krabs stealing a piece of Patrick years ago. And not only does he tell him that he wants it back, but then he goes on to explain the mistake he made, starting off by telling him a fact that most people don't know, which is that starfish can regenerate a lost limb. And only a few know that a lost limb can regenerate a new sea star. And when Krabs seen this, he basically said, "You're gonna make me so much money." He took that Patrick and kept cutting his head into little patty slices over and over again. Meaning for years, this is the meat in between those buns that Bikini Bottom residents have been ordering. And that's when Krabs says, all these years and you're just now remembering? What changed? And Patrick says, you see, Krabs, C-star nervous systems aren't centralized. They're spread throughout our limbs. So when I ate an undercooked Krabby Patty, the memory cells fused with my own, haunting me with my copy's endless nightmares, his anguish, and his lust for revenge. And that's when Krabs gets all of his limbs taken off. Now, that was a lot to take in, but if you know Mr. Krabs well, you know that seems like something Mr. Krabs would do. He's very obsessed with money. There was even a day where he was supposed to pay his employees, but instead gave them a bill that charged them for breathing, talking, and even existing on the job. He sold his best fry cook to basically the devil for 13 cents. And even one episode made Spongebob catch 4 million jellyfish so that he can wring and squeeze them out of all the jelly and trash them for some money. I guess it's safe to say Krabs deserves everything bad that comes to him. Now back to the story, we're shown Sandy on that day when she first encountered Patrick when he became a monster. She's relaxing in her home dome and Patrick comes banging his head against the glass. And she pulls up to him and says, you know you can't get in that way. But he says, I'm sorry, Sandy, but I can't stop. Next thing you know, the dome is gone and Patrick is laying on Sandy trying to devour her. And just when you think it's all over, Sandy lets off 2 shots and says, I'm from Texas, Patrick. I'm always packing heat. And that's when we're brought back to the present day. We're shown a fish man running for his life, tripping and screaming for help until he's consumed and spit out, lifeless and skinless. And we see Sandy hiding from behind a rock saying, how many Patricks are there? And it seems she escaped the Krusty Krabs when Krabs and Patrick started fighting. And that's when out of nowhere from behind Sandy's back, the Clarinet King himself, Squidward, shows up. And that's when Sandy hugs him saying, I never thought I'd be happy to see you. And Squidward says, backhanded compliment, but it's good to see you too, Sandy. And Sandy basically goes on and says that bullets only slow them down, it doesn't get rid of them, and so she doesn't think that they have a weakness. And Squidward in a cold way says, they do. And proceeds to play his clarinet as loud as he can through their ears, putting them to sleep. Now, many of you that have watched SpongeBob know that this is a running gag within the show of how Squidward is just a bad clarinet player. And this is a callback to the time when Patrick was actually excited to hear him play the clarinet and instantly fell asleep when he started playing it. So upon checking the Patrick's bodies, they were out cold. And Squidward ends up reaching into one of their bodies and saying, he's not gonna mind this. He never used it anyways, and took Patrick's brain. And that's when they pull up to the Krusty Krab, and Squidward says to Sandy, you know you don't have to go back in there. You can leave and go anywhere from this. Which is true. She can take a bus and head straight up to Texas if she wanted to. But she basically says, there's just some things you just can't run from, Squidward. Some things you gotta face. And when she turns on her flashlight, she hears somebody say, Sandy. And she's like, what happened to you, Mr. Krabs?
He made me eat it. A Krabby Patty. Raw. I can feel it.
Welcome back, Sandy. I'm glad to see you've survived, Sandy. I have so much more to show you.
Get behind me.
And you brought Squidward from one invertebrate to another. It's good to see you've grown a spine.
I'm sorry, Patrick, but this is the only way to end this.
You're gonna put me to sleep with one of your songs?
You were always too stupid to appreciate real art.
Or maybe you're just a boring musician. Though technically proficient, you've always lacked the ability to improvise.
So at this point, Patrick has ripped off his ears and completely dashes towards Squidward and Sandy. Sandy shoots at him saying, "Squidward, look out! Squidward, no!" And Patrick, knowing that there's no way out for them, corners them saying, "Now, where were we?" And Sandy looks at Squidward saying, "When I give you the word, we run for it." And Squidward says, "What's the point? He's right about me. I'm just a loser, a talentless hack pretending to be an artist." And that's when Sandy looks at him and says, "Squidward, you're one of the smartest people I know, but I wish you were smart enough to know your self-worth and your worthiness for love." And she's taken, snatched up, about to be pulled apart by Patrick, and something is awakened in Squidward that changes the tides, eventually piercing through and destroying all the Patricks in sight. And soaring up through the air, or should I say seawater, with his new transformation, he says, "My Ranger Sharp Regula will rip you to shreds." And while this fight breaks out between Squidward and the other Patricks, Sandy goes on to try to take out the one that took out Mr. Krabs, who's running away. And before she can take the shot, Plankton is there, who stops her from doing it. Keep in mind, this in the show is actually Mr. Krabs' biggest nemesis, but Plankton used to be Mr. Krabs' biggest best friend at some point, so if anyone's gonna be around if Krabs dies, it's gonna be him. And he basically tells her not to shoot, because she's gonna want to see this. And as they walk into the basement of the Krusty Krab, Sandy starts to believe that Plankton is the one behind all of this, as she rightfully should, as there are times where Plankton has done a lot of harsh things just to get the secret Krabby Patty formula. But he basically tells her, "You give me a little bit too much credit. I'm evil, but not this evil." So Sandy's like, "What is this place?" And he says, "This is where Krabs kept his formula. He had to freeze it right away, or else it regenerate. Krabs had this poor guy pumped with growth hormones, which is probably why Patrick couldn't handle that patty that he ate. For years, all I wanted was to learn his secret, and now Krabs makes me wish I never did." And that's when Sandy's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Do I gotta spell it out for you?" And she instantly throws up when she realizes how patties are made. And sooner or later, they realize that there's a whole cult focused around this Patrick that they call the Tortured One. And listen to this, the clones of Patrick are basically tasked to go out and eat as much people as they can so that they can get bigger and thrown down a huge hole where their blood and flesh is sacrificed. And they all have no problem with this because they think that they're gonna be a part of something beautiful. And at the same time, Sandy and Plankton are finding this out. Squidward is fighting the Patricks, and one of them basically tells him the secret as well, saying that he's the reason why this is all happening, saying he's the reason why all this is happening, along with the others that are eating Krabby Patties. And Squidward basically tells him there's a misunderstanding because nobody knew the formula but Krabs. Nobody knew they were eating Patrick. And that's when Patrick starts crying because he realizes he killed Spongebob for no reason. And a swarm of Patricks start to devour Squidward until eventually pounds of weight shred to the water, plowing down a bunch of Patricks off of Squidward, saving him. And we see Larry the Lobster pulled up, and he says all those arms, and it still looks like you could use a hand. And as they team up together, they start to talk about what they're going to do to get rid of all the Patricks, and they start to realize that a lot of them have been going towards the Krusty Krab, and that's when Squidward realizes, oh, where's Sandy? And meanwhile, in the bottom of the Krusty Krab, she's actually being tricked as they're using some type of magic to mimic Spongebob and get her to fall in the pit and sacrifice herself. But it doesn't work, and Sandy prepares to fight off all of them after throwing one of them into the pool of blood. But then she gets caught by some arms of Patrick's that came out of the ground and barely slips away and literally leaves the building as it's being consumed by corpse of Patrick or somewhat. And this is when things get scarier because as she leaves the building, that building is no longer what it seems. It actually is a huge starfish. And if you thought Squidward and Larry were big, this thing literally dwarfs them by miles. Larry is so scared that he can't even move, and he ends up getting caught under this thing and consumed by its arms and legs that are under it. If you didn't know, starfish have hundreds of these suction legs under them, which they use to obviously move around and cling onto prey. So Squidward and Sandy watched as Larry got consumed by that huge starfish that destroyed the Krusty Krab. Now you're probably like, how are they gonna defeat this thing? It's literally dwarfing the Bikini Bottom and destroying it easily. And even Plankton sitting there at all, not because the Bikini Bottom is being destroyed, mostly because it's the Bikini Bottom without the Krusty Krab, finally. It's everything he ever wanted, but he's wondering why he doesn't feel happy. When he gets home, his computer wife named Karen is worried about him and asking what's wrong with him, but he opens his drawer and tells her to prepare the final Plankton. And it makes sense that he's doing this. Just think about it. The Krusty Krab is gone, so the chum bucket is still gonna need people to go there and buy food. So of course he's gonna help the people at the Bikini Bottom who are actually hiding right now, and they think that they're safe as they're hiding away in a building. Bubble Bass is basically talking about how he's sick of taking care of them, and boom, one of Patrick's hands come inside of the building, crushing him. And Patrick starts to consume all the people in that building, most likely to grow even bigger. But then out of nowhere, Squidward saves them with a rope, saying, "You won't take another life, I won't let you. Your fight is with me." And the creature roars in pain. So Squidward is being a true hero in this moment, and we need to clap it up for him in the comments. Meanwhile, Sandy's watching from the ground, and a group of Patricks pull up to her saying, "You are gonna pay for what you did. You will suffer." What the A rebellion crew of some sort comes in riding on a bucket of boats with Old Man Jenkins and some other random fishes that we see from other episodes, with one of their members being Mrs. Puff, who's actually in the show, has been SpongeBob's driving teacher for years. They're completely tearing through these Patricks, shooting them and knocking their heads off. And even though this isn't fully getting rid of them, Sandy did say before that it does slow them down. And Mrs. Puff says to Sandy that you gotta join us, and shows her all the artillery she's packing to fight off these Patricks. Those who know Mrs. Puff knows that she has a history of being in and out of jail, so getting these guns probably wasn't hard for her. But anyways, Squidward is fighting off the creature as much as he can. He's going blow for blow and basically carrying the Bikini Bottom on his back, giving it all he can. He even picks up SpongeBob's house and slams it onto the creature. And Patrick comes out of nowhere and tries to talk to Gary, who's not really sad about anything. He's just chilling, really, and says SpongeBob is not coming back and that he's sorry for what he's done. And then he starts breaking down crying and says, "I'm gonna make this right," once Gary starts seemingly hugging him. Meanwhile, Squidward tries to plan on getting the creature to choke on SpongeBob's house, and it ends up crushing it in its mouth and completely tries to consume Squidward. And as Squidward's fighting back from being sucked inside of its mouth, he thinks of all of his friends and everything he's lost. His willpower is keeping him in the fight, and eventually Squidward gets some help out of nowhere from Sandy. And for a brief moment, Sandy and Squidward share a touching moment after reuniting, and that's when Plankton shows up in his final Plankton form or whatever. And the battle begins with Plankton coming in, slicing him up, then burning him. As Sandy refers to this as a version of Patrick, Plankton starts to torch the monster, saying that he noticed that one of the cells of one of the Patrick cultists was actually burnt after wax poured out on him. And since Plankton are microscopic in size, this was something only a creature of his size could notice, no bigger. But once you think things are going good, Patrick shows up behind him and consumes him. And he unfortunately says his final goodbyes to his wife Karen, getting his head split open. Fortunately, before Patrick could take over the suit, Sandy ends up sniping him through the head and exploding him. And now that her husband's gone, Karen doesn't really see a reason to keep living, so she decides to blow up herself and take out the monster with her for taking her husband. So she tells Sandy and Squidward to get away as far as possible because it's about to detonate. Fortunately, they didn't get away in time, and because of the explosion and the impact, Squidward actually pierces his heart. And Sandy's the only one left to fend off the horde as they're not all gone. And she's trying to protect Squidward, but Squidward noticed that her helmet is actually broken. So he ends up saving her life, putting her into a bubble and making her float to the surface, where she's safe. And as she floats at the surface of the ocean, Squidward gets a flashback to the day everything started. SpongeBob is being super annoying, saying his name over and over again like he usually does. And he closes the door on his face. And when Patrick comes to the door, he says, "I already told SpongeBob no, Patrick."
What are you doing?
"I must answer the call."
Get away from me!
And Squidward runs away. And when he comes back, the Bikini Bottom is no longer where it was at. Using SpongeBob's tie as a bandana, Squidward, as he's being eaten by the starfish, starts to apologize to SpongeBob, saying he's sorry for being a trash friend. And Patrick comes out of nowhere saying, "Stop! You lied to me!" And the big Patrick tells him, "Brother, join us so we can feed the tortured one." And Patrick says, "No! The tortured one's a big fat liar! Your call said they were all in on it, but only Mr. Krabs knew that the tortured one was being tortured! Squidward, SpongeBob, none of them knew what happened to you! None of them knew that the Krabby Patties were made out of Patrick flesh! And Squidward's like, made out of what? None of them knew what they were eating, so why would they be punished?"
Because they never asked.
And that's when Squidward says enough and rips out the pole from his heart, saying, "I have 3 of them," releasing pounds of ink. And that's when he noticed that Patrick didn't die. SpongeBob was there and saved him. And Patrick says, "SpongeBob, I thought I killed you."
You did. Sea stars aren't the only creatures who are able to regenerate. Sea sponges can come back from just a single cell, and you're a messy eater. So I've been growing on you, Patrick. You and every copy of yourself that you made. But now the time has come to assemble, so let's have some fun.
And that's when they start to battle like 2 kaijus going at it. Meanwhile, Sandy's floating on the surface of the sea, and something rises up on the bottom of her. And it's Barnacle Boy, who's looking for the Krusty Krab, but doesn't know where it is, and actually ran into Sandy. Now, if you need your memory jogged, Mermaid Man has a sidekick named Barnacle Boy, and they both are basically the most infamous superheroes in the whole Bikini Bottom, but are now washed up in the Bikini Bottom, no pun intended, and actually, Barnacle Boy lost Mermaid Man to Patrick, unfortunately. The starfish that is usually shown on their face was Patrick. His cells got into there and kind of left him dead in a brutal way. So of course, Barnacle Boy wants revenge and gives Mermaid Man powers to Sandy, allowing her not only to breathe underwater without the glass dome, but giving her super strength and magical powers, and everyone eventually reunites to watch as SpongeBob and Patrick duke it out. And as SpongeBob is looking like he's about to lose and everybody's going to get consumed still, they come up with a plan to actually erupt the volcano and have Patrick get dumped inside of there. Unfortunately, Barnacle Boy did actually lose his life during this, and SpongeBob is seemingly losing, and they have to move Patrick all the way to the volcano. And the tortured one gets into SpongeBob's head, and they have a conversation.
SpongeBob, you cannot escape. This time, you will stay with me forever. The time has come for you to pay the price for your carelessness, SpongeBob.
Patrick.
You devoured my flesh for years without ever even bothering to learn what you were consuming.
I didn't?
But your ignorance absolves you of nothing. Once I've dissolved every last cell in your body, I'll finish Sandy and Squidward and the rest of Bikini Bottom. Then I'll grow a new army of stars, and we will spread across the entire ocean, consuming everything, indiscriminately, like you. But first, I'm going to enjoy tearing your mind apart.
Gary?
Yes, I'll kill Gary too. I'll kill all your... Wait. Gary. No!
So Gary came out of nowhere in clutch, saving everybody including SpongeBob to give them the opportunity to finally take down this Patrick or Tortured One for good. They crack open the earth, and as they're about to dump the Tortured One into the magma, he begs for SpongeBob not to leave him, but SpongeBob doesn't care. And as he's thrown in, SpongeBob watches, but then the ground breaks from under him, and Patrick goes in to save SpongeBob, and so do the others. And fortunately, they all survive and make it out through that day, ending the horror in the Bikini Bottom, finally stopping the monster Mr. Krabs created. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to not miss out on the next AUs. Make sure to check out the description, and while you're down there, comment below what you guys want to see next. God bless all of you people. Peace.